Welcome to the third session of the 2022 International Permaculture Day event held by the Permaculture Education Institute. This session is called Permaculture Regeneration, and I'm your host, Morag. Before we begin, I wanted to let you know that you can find the links to all of our presenters in the show notes and the link to the Permaculture Education Institute too. You can also find recordings of the other wonderful panels that were held on International Permaculture Day as well, Growing Permaculture and Permaculture Futures. So let's dive in, and thanks to the hundreds who joined live, and also welcome if you're tuning in here for the first time. Enjoy. Hello and welcome everyone to this session. This is the celebration of the International Permaculture Day. My name is Morag from the Permaculture Education Institute, and it's my absolute pleasure to be hosting this panel today. We've just had a couple of sessions come previously, and I know that many of you have been on that too. So we started the day with the Growing Permaculture. We went into Permaculture Futures. We've just come off a call with David Holmgren and Maddie Harland and also Brian van Hertzen. And here on this panel, focusing on permaculture regeneration, looking at how we can apply permaculture thinking in some of the most challenging situations and with people who need it the most. So I'm going to try and find ROSEMARY MORROW as well, who's as an attendee, and bring her into this panel. But before I introduce the panelists, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land in which I'm meeting with you. I'm sitting here on the unceded lands of the Gubbi Gubbi, and I'd like to pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. I'm sitting here in a solar-powered office in the midst of the permaculture garden, in the midst of a permaculture village called Crystal Waters, and it's a delight to be sharing this out with you. I'm so delighted that we have this group of panelists here today to explore these ideas, and that we have all of you here in the audience. There's been, let me just check, well over 800 people who registered for this session. So I'm absolutely thrilled that you're all here. I just wanted to say too that I will be recording this session, so you can get it and share it afterwards. Also, I'm mentioning that because a couple of people, if your internet is not quite strong enough, you might drop out. So just refresh and come back, and if you miss anything, I'll send you the recording. So I just wanted to point out too that there is a chat. Feel free throughout the session to be dropping in questions and ideas and references and sharing ideas. This is a place to cross-pollinate. But after this session, when this ends, we're actually going to go straight to a Zoom call, and I'll make sure the links get sent out where we can continue to talk. So all of these three sessions that we've been having, we can take that and, sorry, the bat at my window. We can take all of that and thread that together and explore together in the permaculture pollination session coming up. So without any further ado, I would like to welcome to this panel. Firstly, I'd like to introduce NATALIE TOPA. NATALIE TOPA is based out of Kenya and has decades of experience working in disaster areas, and focusing her most recent work that I find some of the most inspiring work in permaculture is her work with Sponge Village, and looking at broad-scale ecosystem transformation and food resilience system in particularly in refugee communities throughout East Africa and beyond. And I'll let her share more about her work in a moment. She's going to share a few pictures about the work that she's doing and race us through some of her extraordinary work. We have Nasana Coppola below her on my screen. I don't know if it's the same arrangement for you. But anyway, Nasana is here from India, where there's a massive heat wave going on at the moment. Nasana has spent his life, professional life dedicated, and personal life dedicated to permaculture. He's hosted the Permaculture India. He's Aranya Agricultural Alternatives. He works with thousands of people training in permaculture throughout villages throughout India, and is an absolute inspiration. If any of you have ever seen the Global Gardener video that Bill Mollison put together, and there was Dr. Venkat in there talking to Bill Mollison, well, that is Nasana's teacher, I understand. So there's a long tradition of permaculture work going on where you are, and really looking forward to hearing from you. And we have Boniface Gomez, who is based in Bangladesh, from the Bangladesh Sustainable Development Association. I may have got that order round wrong, I'm sorry, but we'll share the link in there. Boniface's work is absolutely inspiring. I met him through Realliance and also Permaculture for Refugees. Boniface is working with eco-villages and permaculture in areas that are affected by climate change, by flood. His work in disaster preparedness is extraordinary, and his work too in Cox's Bazar, working with permaculture with Myanmar refugees, is also extraordinary. So I was just about to hand it over to Natalie. Oh, here she's back. Okay, so while Natalie's talking, I will find Rosemary. You're here in the audience somewhere, and I'll bring you into the group. So Rosemary Morrow is a author and educator of permaculture, the founder of Permaculture for Refugees, has dedicated her life to exploring permaculture in support of people who need it the most too, and particularly teaching permaculture teachers who can help to ripple it out further. So an extraordinary group of people here today, and I know that it's going to be a rich conversation. I hope as much as possible we can get to many of your questions, and as was said in the previous session, we're going to have to keep doing these kind of things because the conversation just didn't quite, there wasn't enough time to answer all the questions and to get to all the threads. So let's just see this as a starting point and that we can continue. Natalie, if you're ready to go, can I hand the baton to you now?
So, well, thanks, first of all, Morag and Narsana Ji, Boniface and Ro, hopefully if you're able to join us, and everyone who's on the call. Happy International Permaculture Day. I feel like this is really a year where we're moving into this transition synergy. I see it all over the world. My name is NATALIE TOPA, and I have been living here in East Africa for almost 17 years, but I've been working in the context of displacement and disasters since 2004, actually, when I was working as an urban planner in the United States. And I started working with FEMA after some hurricanes in 2004 in Florida. This was before Katrina. But in my journey, I've been always looking for solutions. I've been working in the humanitarian sector for decades, and a lot of the things I see are really annoying. A lot of wasted energy, wasted resources. So I'm going to zip us through a few images of how I have tried over many different capacities where I've worked to bring in different kinds of solutions at different scales. As I mentioned, I live here in East Africa. I work as an independent consultant on a multitude of different types of problem-solving initiatives and innovations. So I'm going to just share some examples of different scales of how I have brought these solutions and design-based thinking into different scales within forced displacement. And I just want to clarify that when we talk about, I know a lot of people talk about refugees and permaculture with refugees. The conversation really needs to be about forced displacement, because not all displaced people are refugees. Many are returnees, internally displaced people, and then of course the host community where they may be situated, either for short or long term. So let's go to the next slide. And I'm going to try to zip through really quickly. I know we have limited time. If you can show the next slide, Morag. Here I'm looking at that arrow, the different scales. So when we talk about the context of forced displacement, that can be camps and shelters, that can be settlements, that can be protection of civilian camps, which can be very crowded and dense. So from the very small scale to what I call sponge gardens or sponge shelters, how we can use locally available resources, energy flows, natural influences to create just food security, but also reduce heat island effect, create shade and coolness around the home. Then going up to the whole entire homestead or the compound, our NGO compounds, which are often, demonstration sites of waste and degenerative practices, up to the village level or the entire camp. So all of these principles, it's a principle-based innovation that we're bringing, and that can be scaled up even up until the watershed level or the catchment zone or the larger landscape. I say later in the presentation, I was joking to myself this morning, I think permaculture is kind of an anti-gravity movement, right? We're trying to speed up the slowing down of, of flows of water and nutrients. So I kind of feel like we're an anti-gravity movement, but all of those steps that we take can be scaled up to, you know, John D. Liu and the Les Plateau example. So if you go to the next slide, you know, even when COVID hit, I made this little tiny graphic for our teams just to say, I don't want the legacy of COVID to be sitting water, right? And a malaria, mosquito honeymoon situation. Let's get that water into production. Even if it's soapy, let's work with science to turn public health risks into production, turn water from destruction to production. So next slide, Morag. So, you know, this is something we see all over the place: wasted resources, dripping water, dirty, filthy, disease-growing situations that should be turned into, using design, understanding the energy and flows, even at this very small scale. How can we protect a water tank from spoilage, from sun, and how can we turn that kind of disease and evaporation and loss of opportunity into a tiny little micro oasis? These are very simple, no-cost interventions that we can do in our homes, in our compounds, in refugee or displacement settings. Next slide. So one thing I love doing is going into the compounds of NGOs and connecting the dots. Using the resources, trying to redirect flows and turning floods into food, which is a term I like to use to describe how we're taking the energy of water and turning that into productive biological uplift. So this was a compound in Tanzania. It was getting a huge amount of flooding into the compound, destroying the internal concrete walls. And just by making a garden, you know, they had brought civil engineers and all these things, but by making a garden to passively harvest that water and that extreme water behavior, we're able to get that into production and pacify that intensity so it's not so destructive. And this is applicable in your urban home, in a refugee camp, in an office compound, a corporate headquarters. So we're engineering with science. And a lot of this is citizen engineering. Next slide. So very, very small space. Here we're doing double dug beds to reduce evaporation. I don't know why we have vertical systems. I see people with hydroponics and vertical gardens in Somalia, in a desert. Get that evaporation underground and under control. So this is really, really small space food, you know, nutrition security, just to supplement maybe some of the food distribution. Next slide. So, so, you know, here, refugees are not given prime real estate, Morag, you know, they're given often very, very poor and degraded lands. This is Martha. She's a Dinka from South Sudan, now situated in a very rocky, degraded landscape in Uganda. But when we created a passive harvesting system for her, if you go to the next slide, you'll see what happened just after one single rainy season. We integrated so many perennials. Those are beans I brought from Somalia that are perennial. But we just created a trap, an energy trap. We want to have a parking lot of nutrient and water, not super highways leaving, right? Next slide. So now that was going from the small space to a bigger space around her shelter. Now this is Denisa's farm in Tanzania. And this was done with Warren Brush, by the way, and the previous one. We, you know, I was with the Danish Refugee Council and often brought Warren in to help do these large trainings that we did. But here we designed an entire, you know, prison for water at Janice's house. Water could not leave here. It's just soaking and quenching these, you know, these soils. We created food forests, bioswales on contour, and did so much mulching and planted so intensely that when you go to the next slide now, you'll see that after just one, actually, I think this is after a year and a half, you can see that kitchen, that structure, the round timber structures, her kitchen. The image on the left was how it looked as we were getting started. And then on the right, that was a year and a half later. You can't even, it looks like a jungle. It looks like we went from Ethiopia to Congo in that same image, you see? So if you go to the next slide, people think that ecological restoration takes a really long time. It doesn't. Nature's a moving bus, and all she's trying to do all the time is grow a forest. And we show up like whack-a-moles, just trying to stop her in her tracks. So let's jump on to the moving bus, which is nature. Here's in Uganda, this is another training we did with Warren, where this road was receiving so much flooding. And you know what else is on that road is cow manure. This is a very pastoral area with a lot of livestock. So there's all this nutrient concentrated along the road corridor, but it was flooding. So we literally just grabbed that flood, picked it up, made it a dam. And if you go to the next photo, the next slide, you'll see that within less than a year, it already started to look and feel like a natural and function like a natural wetland and a natural ecosystem. Did you get to? Yeah, there you go. So and now they have livestock water, they have fish, they have water for construction, they have water for agriculture. And the area around the dam has become so productive. They're growing tomatoes and bananas and a lot more market activity. Next slide. So, along these lines also is something that we introduced, Warren and I, to a program that we were working on together in Uganda, was this concept of spring recharge, right? Humans, because we're dumb, we just keep accessing groundwater. That should be the last source of water that we ever touch. The first source is primary water, that which falls free, rich, and nitrogen-rich, free, out of the sky, and acidic. It's very important that it's acidic. So here what we've done is off of a road, harvest that water into a bioswale on contour up above a spring. You can see in the center there, it says Spring Eye, and then created a big food forest with tons of water harvesting, what we call smile burns or earth buns, to just swallow all of that water that's coming down. And just like humans, Morag, groundwater systems, the more input you have, you've got output, right? When we drink a lot of water, it's got to go somewhere. So what we're doing is, forcing the soil to drink and swallow all of this water, and then it starts shooting out of the spring eye. So these are things that can happen within a season, and for the same amount of money often as a borehole, right? Next slide. So I think in this next example, I don't think it's changed for me yet.
It's an illustration I'm seeing.
Is it Sponge Village?
It's the mountain, Burundi mountain.
So in Burundi, for my former agency, I was given about $100,000 and they said, please go and do whatever you want. So there was a mountain where about 5 people had died because of flash floods and extreme water behavior. So we looked at the mountain as an entire system, and starting at the very, very top, how do we slow that water down, get it off of the footpath, which is turning into gullies. The more that water, starts heading down the hardscape footpath that's compacted, it starts to carve these big gullies. So from the top of the mountain to the middle, turning water off of the, actually go to the next slide, turning water off of the footpath and into farms on contour. So now we're removing it from those gullies and getting it, food from the flood into food. So here, in this illustration on the right, that's the footpath that you can see heading down the mountain. And what we did using just hand dug earthworks and stoneworks is we had that water take a turn and go into the farm of this woman called Evelina and soak and saturate. And we had a whole fill and spill circuit of smile berms, food forests and swales. So water would just fill up one system, pour to the next, fill up, pour to the next. And then to make sure that we didn't pour water into her house, we then at the very bottom of it poured it back onto the footpath, which is the original trajectory, but we swallowed so much of that water and are banking it in the soil. Next slide. So the next slide, I know there's a delay, but I know what the slide is. It's the gully plugging. So this is where I said permaculture is an anti-gravity movement. And, we're just trying to speed up the slowing down. So we, actually, Daniel Lawton was here with me, and we had worked with the team and trained the community to establish gully plugging, small check dams using only locally available materials. And after one rainy season. Already it started to silt up, fill up, so that depth becomes less hazardous. And then on the right side, I just got this photo last week, the vetivers, the bananas, the bamboo, the lemongrasses, all of these, whatever we can throw in there that we hope will snag and just be this Velcro for water and nutrient passing through. And since then, there's been no more flooding on the mountain. We've managed to stop it. So go on to the next slide. So this is the sponge village that you're talking about, Morag. And essentially, this is a training that Warren and I conducted. We had about 200 people, 190 people. We had 6 machines, and we had just over a week. And we worked with the community to understand how water behavior, happens on the site, water coming off of the road. And there's a misguided thinking that dams should be at the bottom of a valley, right? A big valley tank, but we lose an opportunity to store water higher up in the landscape and bring not only the water retention systems, but the infiltrative power of that water higher up into the landscape so that it will infiltrate and percolate downhill slowly. So this is the sponge village of Otego. And if you go to the next slide, we created a series of 3 large dams interconnected by swales. And this is what it looks like now. This is the biggest dam on site. It's actually called the NATALIE Dam. But this is a pastoral community that was already entering into conflict with a neighboring community because they were sharing a tiny little, water pump, and everybody's cows and manure and mud and just not a good situation. But now we've created permanent water security in the village, and even neighboring communities are now coming to access the water for livestock. So it's made a major impact on this community. It was not without its issues. We had a lot of learnings. There were a lot of things that had, after the site was commissioned with the first rains, a lot of learnings and had to go and do modifications. So I want to be clear about that. We don't just do things and they're always awesome right out of the gate. But I think it's awesome. There's a lot of water that wasn't there before. So next slide.
Flood-blown food systems with the bottles.
Yeah, so recently, just last month, I was in South Sudan. I've been working in South Sudan for the last 17 years since I moved there in 2005, and I lived there for 4 years. But I was in Bentiu, which is part of the greater Upper Nile region. So basically, this is the sump of the region. I'm here in Nairobi. We are in the Nile River Basin watershed, right? And all these countries, Tanzania, Uganda, Nairobi, we're getting more hardscape, more middle class, more concrete, more apartment buildings, and all of that means more runoff. And that water, which used to remain here in Nairobi and Kampala and all these other cities, is gaining speed, volume, ripping topsoil off of the landscapes and heading down the system towards South Sudan, towards Egypt, through the Nile River. And again, this is the gravity situation that we're trying to, to harness. So now Bentiu is a completely flooded area in Unity State. And I was there for almost a month, developing flood zone food systems. So this was a raft made with local sticks. We did 5 different prototypes of floating rafts. And here we just used discarded plastic bottles. So there's some resource recovery to create flotation and buoyancy. If you go on to the next slide. So we've got 5 different types of rafts that we were trying with different types of design materials, flotation materials. We tried old tires, jerry cans, barrel drums, and luckily the cheapest and the most available was actually the plastic bottles. So if you go to the next slide, we made a number of rafts. We did different types of trellises, but this was really co-designing and co-engineering with the community. We changed the shape based on how they thought it would be more useful. So here women are harvesting water hyacinth, where here in East Africa, it's known as a nuisance. People don't like it and they just want to get rid of it. But I'm like, back the truck up. That's some really good resource. If you look at Bangladesh and other parts of the world where it's used for building fertility and soil, what we're doing is piling onto the raft bed soil, manure, hyacinth, chopping that down really well, and then the seedlings are going to be planted soon. If you go on to the next slide. I think, okay. So then just, major nod to indigenous knowledge. Here we are looking at major flooding in this area. And I was thinking, well, how did ancient peoples solve for these issues? And one of the examples is the Aztec Chinampas in Xochimilco in Mexico City. So people were living in, wetland swamp areas and actually constructed raised island beds in order to elevate the soil and the growing surface above the water. So if you go to the next slide, just as the slide is changing, these principles, whether we're dealing with total drought and arid conditions and desertification or extreme water events and floods, we're still using principles of soil building, working with biology, and physics to try to solve for food security issues. So here we had reinforced the entire chinampa with timbers. We made a trellis to optimize this growing surface area, but also to protect and shade the little leafy greens that we'll be planting. And if you go on to the next slide. This week, I'm guiding the team remotely. They are finalizing a new larger bed, which will not have the reinforcements with the timber. So we're sloping and beveling the edges. The first bed is 5 meters by 10 meters. The new one is 8 meters by 14 meters. But people really are appreciating this approach. And so we're going to monitor it and test it as we go. So all of this is to say that in the context of forced displacement, just like any other context, it's about connecting the dots. It's about understanding the local resources, appreciating the local knowledge, right? When we show up to a community, we're all teachers and students, everyone equally. And so how do we make very context specific, decisions about what we need to engineer in order to have food, the fodder, whatever it is that we need, building materials, and how do we get those into production in a way that can be regenerative and hopefully be part of healing the landscapes that are so, just collapsing in many cases now. So the very last slide is just a thank you slide with this this little girl who was in Burundi, and I just loved her t-shirt. It says, "Nothing is as it seems." And I think we're just in such a crazy era right now in our world that I just felt that t-shirt really spoke to me. So thanks. Thanks for the opportunity to share some of that. Thanks, Morag.
Thank you, Natalie. What an incredible presentation. There's been comments flooding through saying, can we have the presentation? Could we share this? Can we learn more? And I know we've just talked too about doing another more extended masterclass together. So again, if you're interested in following up this incredible work, then I will let you know about that when Natalie and I get that organized. It shouldn't be, maybe another month or two. So
thanks. Can I just say one last thing, Morag, is that I met Narsana Ji at Navdanya when I was studying with Dr. Vandana Shiva, and Narsana Ji is one of my teachers. So I'm so happy that he's here and is able to just witness how I've been putting all of this knowledge into practice. So thank you.
Oh, thank you, Natalie. And Narsana, how about we hand the baton across to you to pick up on the threads of that and to share some of the work that you're doing in your parts of India and how that is going for you, and maybe letting everyone know how you're going in this heat wave. The world is hearing about this incredible heat wave in India at the moment. How are you faring?
It is a very privilege to have this kind of discussion, and particularly thanks to you to have created this platform to share from particularly third world countries like Bangladesh and India, and even Nairobi, Kenya, TAP. Very interesting. I think I like the way you are organizing this. I think we are happy to join, and whatever the knowledge, whatever the work we have been doing, we're ready to share. So just before more than the heat, I think we have a lot of treatment also required for this climate. I think this I don't know how much it is right to say there's a climate change, but climate chaos is going on. I think very difficult to understand. It is not new for us, but I think it's over a decade. I think almost since last 1 decade, a lot of changes we have been noticing in India and across the world. It's not in India itself, but we are able to do. There are some solutions. I think this has been talking. Is not just permaculture. Permaculture is a regenerative culture. I think we have to be very clear with what permaculture talks about. As a permaculture is more the culture which we talk. I think is what kind of culture we have, where we are living, how to understand properly. I think we are not only just agriculture talking, not the culture. Also is almost a reconstruction of societies. I think how we are not just culture, we are talking about the caring as the permanent caring, not only culture. I think that is very, very important aspect of permaculture, what I understood. So when I did my PDC in 1987, I think I attended Bill Mollison PDC in 1987, first time when he conducted in India, but I was not fully concentrated. I could not understand much about what Bill is talking about, but I was attending, I was helping, but not much. But when I attended again in 1990 with Robin Francis, I think I have got a lot of clarity. I think that extension of my knowledge, my information, I think it is almost is a founded. A lot of things are concepts are founded during that time. I think I did my teacher training with the ROSEMARY MORROW. I think she's a wonderful teacher. I think a lot of different levels she took her. Almost all took her as us in a different level of understanding about exactly the permaculture. I think we were doing, but little more clarity was missing in our entire work. After that, I think we got more clarity. I think the first when I did my permaculture course with Bill and then Robin Francis, whatever I learned, I think it was so confusing for me to how to apply those principles and ethics as far as the Indian context of agriculture. I think that was the biggest challenge for us to do what to do. So the moment I came and I learned my PDC concepts and ethics and everything principles, by the time I came, most of the India, the more a lot of people are landless, and most of them are there's almost all the caste system is very strong, and social structure is more important than looking at the resources. I think that is a caste system are very strong. I have to deal at a time with the social structure and a lot of the feudal system in India. I think a lot of capitalism and imperialism. I think all these isms made lot of confusion for me. How to handle these isms to look at the things? I think the problem is the poverty. Okay, but at the same time the poverty is a social structure. But at the same time our resource, was great resource we had in India is the human resource. I think that is my strength. I think human resource in other terms we can call it the community. The community is our strength, that is our energy. I think let us take up that as an element. As a community is the biggest strength, biggest resource for us. Let us start with work with community. I think they are the right teachers and good messengers, good teachers. Let us go with them. I think do something. The moment I came, I started my work in the initially in 1970s, 80s. I think that is a little tricky to handle this situation. But the moment I came, I think where to do it. When I am working, with the downtrodden, that's called almost all these oppressed or suppressed also. Oppressed and suppressed and downtrodden classes, they are totally no resources, totally resourceless people. So where to do this permaculture? First, there's a very fundamental question I faced. I think then I started, before talking about permaculture, let us make the access to the resources rather than talking about permaculture. I think that's I took it as a issue of the right to food. When we are calling it right to food, I think right to land also. Where does that food come from? Without land, you don't get a food. I think there's a very fundamental issue with most of the countries in third world countries. There's a biggest challenge how to address that issue. Just permaculture is not just only gardening or spiral garden. I'm making very clear. I think that you have to locally apply those principles where you are from. What you wanted to do is how you address these issues at the social level and commons and the people as a community. I think before talking permaculture, I think you address these issues, whether they are having a good life. I think the redesigning our lives first. Redesigning forms and landscapes are next. So how do you apply these principles? That's the biggest challenge I faced initially. I started community work. I think I was working at that time. Now I'm working with most of the oppressed and suppressed, particularly again in the oppressed, suppressed sections. of people, I think the women and children is the one of the very, very vulnerable. I think for all the anything negative or any adverse situations happens, this is the people first, the victims of any situation. I think that I addressed most of the women I addressed, and I started working with women. I think this is one of the best way to understand really the nature. To work with women, I learned many things. I think there I combined with the regeneration and the permaculture. How we can combine, how you balance this is a community issue. At the same time, regenerative agriculture, regenerative systems, and the permanent culture. And this is where exactly when I talking this, always talking about the soil erosion. I think looking at the society, I think it is totally got damaged. I think before the cultural soil erosion, I talk about climate change, soil erosion, soil degradation. Whatever the cultural degradation, whatever the cultural erosion, I think who is addressing those issues? I think when we are caught in a second ethic of permaculture, the caring people, I think it's the part of caring people. I think your soil erosion is part of cultural erosion. Cultural erosion should not become a soil erosion. Soil erosion is one of the component, but how it happened, our understanding about agriculture is totally different. I think that's the biggest culprit for these challenges which we are facing today. I think then I took a path of looking at the rights of the wisdom, what they lost. I think that kind of was we not able to. This is the regenerative is able to do. I think we are not able to do because of we got lost. The lost thing you have to regain. How? It is not that simple because we are living in a feudal and totally is a capitalism. I think that not easy. It's a big trap. Coming out from the trap is not just permaculture. Is you need more support from community, not alone. Not few permaculture people are working without working with the communities. You never win the game. That's what I understood by permaculture, all these concepts and permaculture ethics. So then I started my work with getting the land for the landless. I think then you can talk about all this soil erosion and nice spirals and raised beds and growing your own food. This is okay. But first of all, there is a very fundamental, there is a permanent, a land as soil is a permanent asset. Without having that permanent land, permanent asset, if you talk something, they only just surfacing certain things, you may do it. But it's not a permanent. It's not been talking about a permanence, not sustainable. I never use sustainable word at all. Whose sustenance? The permanence is more solid and meaningful rather than talking about sustainable. So this in Indian context, we are looking at a different in permaculture at a different level, is a more community and we have to empower by giving some rights, some wisdom, not just giving some gifts and donations. This does not work. I think permaculture is a different level you have to look at. I think how far we are understanding they're addressing those issues, then you talk about permaculture, it has some meaning. Otherwise, without addressing their issues, their problems, if you talk about only growing something, growing is okay. I'm not saying somebody is doing, but that is first step. First step I took that as one of the challenging in social. I think when you are working with the society and the community, I think there are a lot of caste, class, and a lot of the things which is community level, lot of issues, how you want to handle them. I think how you empower people by during this course of doing things, lot of challenges you have to face. I think there the principles and ethics you have to bring in and try to solve some of the issues with applying these principles, these ethics, these disciplines. That's what I understood. So that slowly I moved a different level of having some land for the people. At that time I came and around where I went and started my work, then most of them are landless. So today they're all landholders. So that is one of the big challenge to face, to look at the things, how they are managing their resources, how they are utilizing, what are the way they are living, how they are continuing their lives with the nature. I think there the nature connection started. I think that is another level of understanding about my permaculture. Then in Bill, I think in 95, I attended, I happened to go to Bill Pay's place in Australia. I stayed there for 2 months. I met all my teacher, Robin Francis as well. I think he has given a lot of insights. I think permaculture is Narsana, not you have to. It's a radical approach. It's aggressive, not just talk about the plants. I think you have to different level you have to go, and because these are required in countries like feudal system is very strong like India. I think you have to think differently. You have to apply these principles wherever you like, but before that, you need more radicalism. I think that slogan made me to think a lot, not just, I think, is designing my land and landscape. I think designing my attitude, designing my mindset, designing my approach, designing my life, designing my just aggressive way of looking at things. I think without designing your landscape does not give any meaning. It does not give any satisfaction to me. That's what I understood. So then I started my journey to a different level of working with some dry lands, some wetlands, and the tribals. And the more, wherever I go, I look at the women. I think they're very, very genuine and very close to the nature. I think you can learn many things from there. There's a lot of treasure of knowledge with them. I think best if you want to work, if you want to know something, you have to work with the women groups and women, the people, those who are working hard on their lands. I think they know much, much better than others. That was, I always mention. I started with working with the tribals as well. The tribals, I think they are only forest. Tribals are always in our area is the forest dwellers. The forest dwellers I started, and the lot of lands they have, but is somebody is almost all they're non-tribal. Non-forest dwellers are encroached, and they're most of the lands they're not in their hands. Then another level of activism I started. Permaculture is, before permaculture I did a lot more activism. That is required. Otherwise, without activism, if you want to act, I think you will become inactive. That's what I understood by the activism. Then I took.
I could listen to you all day, but I am noticing the time, and I would really love to give space too for Boniface to have a chat. Oh my gosh, the perspectives that you're bringing into the conversation, following on from the depth of experience that Natalie has shared. What a rich conversation. I'd also like to see if we could make some space for some conversation at the end, if possible. But please stay on, Nasano, and if we can introduce Boniface now. Thank you so much. Welcome, Boniface.
Yeah, Boniface.
Yes, hello. Yeah. So I'm really happy to meet you today. Now, just a minute, please. I'm trying to show the screen, but maybe it's not possible. Maybe
we can see you.
Oh,
yeah, we can hear you.
Oh, that's okay. Anyhow, so as I cannot show the pictures, so greetings from Bangladesh Association for Sustainable Development (BSD). I give thanks to Morag especially for arranging this beautiful program, whom I met in Realliance. I give thanks to my teachers also, teacher ROSEMARY MORROW, whom I met in the Norshuna's place in Hyderabad. And also Norshunaji, a couple of whom I talked and also get lessons from him. So I give really happy to meet all of you today. Actually, while my small organization BSD started working in South Bengal and other parts in the country from 2005, we observed that community people were facing lots of problems and challenges which are mostly natural and man-made disasters. So some of the things were like this, that there was sudden cyclone, storm, drought, high wave, all this, too much rain. Climate refugees then started living on the dams. Drinking water crisis, irrigation water crisis, water level raise, we can see that there. Then unemployment. And people are having only one season vegetable there. Then diarrhea, dysentery, dehydration, all lots of diseases. Most of the tubers were not functioning well, only saline water were coming out. Most of the ponds and canals were dried and polluted with salinity. And I saw the biodiversity in Sundarban and other area was really hampered, and plants and creatures were dying. So I and my staffs started talking with the community people about these problems and challenges. We talked about mitigation of the problems and showed hope to them for future. We started permaculture design courses in some of the communities, and other communities eco-village design. People gradually started permaculture designing works and eco-village, but it took quite a long time for real practicing. But now, after 17 years of doing the work, we see different pictures in those communities who are really facing lots of problems then. We can see this now, little in short. Now, I see in 156 village communities in the country where there are about 5 lakhs people are practicing permaculture gardening. 32 village communities are transformed into eco-village and started practicing ecology, sociology, economic and partially worldview. Members started cultivating saline-tolerant vegetables, crops and fruits. Landless and unemployed people of those villages developed livelihood and employment. Members started practicing the following disaster adaptation techniques. Actually, all these are happening in those 156 communities. Actually, they are practicing for saving their lives, animals, crops, and valuable materials from flood, fresh flood, high wave, cyclone, drought, heavy rain, salinity soil and water. There are some of them are high floor and lower ceiling living room, house shade, kitchen, and toilets. They started making those 5 feet high, and the floor. And then also tying 4 corners of the ceiling with strong rope to the pillars that a storm cannot blow this away. Then installing emergency clay pitcher inside the rooms for keeping emergency food, water, valuable materials before leaving the house and before cyclone. They planted various kinds of strong wood, fruit, and medicinal plants around. Developed hanging gardens, raised gardens, sack gardens, floating gardens, and various other gardens. Members started growing and preserving and using local seeds and organic seeds, which they could not before. Members producing own compost, herbal, pesticides, and using and also selling to the interested people. Villages developed rainwater reserve system in almost all the villages for drinking, washing, and irrigation, which really is different now. Besides climate refugees on the roadsides and dams have taken shelter in the high-raised muddy houses in the eco-villages or in the government shelters. Rohingya refugees are also cultivating various kinds of vegetables around and over the tents. Members are cultivating vegetables, crops in all seasons during the year, which they did only one time. Members of the eco-villages and permaculture villages are healthier, I think. They are happier and they are enjoying a better living than that of other village communities surrounding. So this is in short. I'm sorry I couldn't show the pictures. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Boniface. And as Rosemary Morrow has said in the chat, so these strategies from Boniface about living through floods and cyclones could be used globally, and that you've developed such good early strategies for huge floods. And so the work that you're doing is extraordinary. And perhaps maybe, Boniface, if you're able to share me your slides, I could share at least some of the pictures as I send out like the recording of this as well, because I know people would like to see that.
Yes.
work.
I'll be
Yeah.
able to send you later on even the videos. Then you can distribute to the interested
Great.
people.
I'm sure people would love to see that. I'm really
Thank
sorry that wasn't working for you. So we have a few minutes left, and I would love to invite either any of the panelists to ask one another about a question, like a question or to follow up, while I look to see whether there's any questions, and also to invite all of you who are listening here to pop your questions into the Q&A section as well. That would be great. So I'm looking to see if there's any questions, but do any of you have any questions for each other? Was my my first response. Would you like to respond to one another?
I just was wondering if Ro was able to join and say anything.
Well, I have been trying, Ro, to get you in the whole time, and I'm really sorry that that's not working. I'm going to try again, Ro. If you are able, I'm going to invite you as a presenter. I'm doing that now. If you see my little invitation and press on that, you should be able to join us. And if not, I'm really sorry for that. And I'm sorry for all of us that we don't have the company of Ro.
Morag, Alexandra Mills is suggesting that she could use the request to speak button to let her talk.
That's what I'm offering her. But you need to press a button, Ro, to do that. You need to request to speak.
Is it the little hand icon that says?
Yeah. I'm not sure she can do it. I think Ro's having problems. So maybe, Ro, if you'd like to continue to keep chatting on. So there's a couple of questions coming in now here. What are the ways to practice permaculture? I'm just going to read out a couple so you get a sense. What are the ways to practice permaculture in urban space? Christine said, I'm interested in how to help polder management. I'm not sure what that means, Christine. Okay, so let's just start with a question there about urban. And also maybe to Boniface, if you wanted to talk about how you take permaculture into something quite extreme like Cox's Bazar, very tight refugee settlement. I mean, that would also be something very interesting to hear about. So we probably have maybe one or 2 minutes from each of you as like a final kind of comment to share. And again, I'm extremely sorry that the time just flies, and we didn't even hear from Ro. So I'm going to hand it over to you. So for 1 or 2 more minutes from each of you, and I might have to cut you off quickly because otherwise I'll miss starting our pollination session. And I apologise ahead of time for that. Anyone can start.
I was really happy. Yes, I was really happy to hear the Narshana was analyzing the social part, and which is really good. And I think the Bangladesh and India is almost very closer about the social condition and situation. So I was really happy to hear that one. Besides, I would say a little bit about Rohingya refugees. Actually, I was in Hyderabad in Narshana's place. Then I met Rosemary, and she said, "Yeah, your country is really facing problems." I said, "Yes, but I cannot do anything." She said, "I'll go with you." Within 1 month, she came with a big group, and she gave training in the camp, which was really not possible. Government was not allowing. We talked. Then afterwards, she was there about for 2 months. She and other two friends, and there's wonderful training in the camp. Actually, in the beginning, people didn't like to do this, but afterwards, it was really beautiful. And later on, we ran 8 more permaculture design courses there, and still now there is going on. So now in many of the camps, people are having vegetables and this and that, and the waste management really beautiful. But at the beginning, government didn't like, and they didn't approve to any of the NGOs. Now I see all the NGOs are willing to start doing the permaculture, not that they say organic cultivation, but they are coming to us, talking to us. Although we're a very small group, but they started. So this really encouraged me that Rosemary did really fantastic thing here. And now, actually Rohingya people, they normally the camps are so small there in our locality in the Unokia Cox's Bazar. They have only 4 or 5 feet around in front, but at the back no space or side no space. They have only over the tent, and also they can. So we taught them how they can do this hanging vegetable, how they can do the vegetable over the top of the there, or if they have some place left, even in front of the mosques, near the mosque. And actually, it was wonderful when we encouraged 2 mosque, 2 imams. So when they said in the mosque, okay, this is wonderful. So he started doing the permaculture in the compound of mosque, and almost everybody's. And afterwards, within a very short time, almost all the people there in the camps, they're asking seeds from us. This really helped using the assistance of the religious people. We did the same in the inner country. When he saw something very tough, we cannot move. Even in the Hindu area, we talked to the temple priest and also invited them. Even in the Christian church area, we invited the priest or bishop. Please come for a while and say a few words. We found this really, there's like a magic.
Thank you, Boniface. Sorry, I'm going to have to close your conversation. That is a hugely powerful point that you made there, and it really brings together too what Nasana was saying earlier about that the sort of the reconception of society, but also bringing together, like not like trying to replace things, but it's kind of reweaving things. So we literally have maybe 30 seconds left for each of you. So I wonder, Natalie, if I could hand it to you for a short comment, and then we'll end with Nasana as a brief comment.
Yeah, I think for International Permaculture Day, again, it's exciting that we're like being birthed through this ecological transition on how we're becoming an ecological civilization. And I just want to remind people, it's not only about the soil and the design and the plants and the food. There's a convergence now globally of all these movements. Permaculture is about a permanent human culture. Land rights, indigenous rights, sexual and gender justice, racial justice, all of these things are part of the movement, because we can't have ecological justice without all the justices. So, and the things that tie us together, the soil, the biology, the hydrology, that's our common ground. It's an exciting time. I frankly feel excited and positive and inspired by the work so many people are doing. And thanks to our speakers in Morag for today.
Thank you, Natalie. Thank you so much for being here, both of you, Boniface and Natalie. And for the final word, over to you, Nasana.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the talk today is very happy to say that I think today is a May Day also. That is the labor. I respect labor and the energy which they are created. I think we are enjoying that. I think we have to be very, very conscious about that. Today is the May Day. At the same time, the Permaculture Day. That is what my almost emotional talk happened because of that May Day. Sorry for that, but I think that is a reality. Don't forget, I think the day which we had this kind of talk on first is a very great inspiration. Thank you for Morag having this kind of a platform you created on particular on 1st of this May. I think thank you so much, and let us. I think the Boniface and Tap, I met her, and anyway, I could not see the Rosemary, but she's background, a lot of questions, and she's a lot of guidance she's giving on the screen. I could see that. Thank you so much. I think sure. I think I have to be. A little more aggressive, little more thoughtful, and let us to look forward a new society. Not this kind of, I think, exploitation does not work. I think we have to be more harmonious way. We have to live with nature rather than a lot of conflicts. Thank you so much. Water is one of the the issue. She's keep reminding Rosemary, I like it, but I think that is one of the best to solve the lot of issues related associated with the water. I think today we have to be very careful. We have to be, every drop of water should be saved and secured, and we have to hand over to the future generation. That's my message from Aranya. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. I hope that you will be able to join us over in the pollination session that's just about to happen in about a minute. The Zoom link, I hope, will be shared back into the chat again, or it's just, if you scroll down the chat, you'll see it there, Permaculture Pollination. We'll have a chat to talk all together there. So thank you, Nasana, thank you, Boniface, and thank you, NATALIE, for your beautiful and impassioned and thought-provoking presentations today. It really takes our concept of permaculture so deeper and broader and into the spaces we need to be exploring. So thank you so much. And thank you everyone for being here, and happy International Permaculture Day. See you. Bye.
May Day as well.
And May Day as well, yes. Bye-bye.
Yeah. Thank you.
Oh, Rosemary, you're here. Now, Rosemary, now that you're here in the Zoom world, maybe we could just have a little bit of a chance to maybe give you a chance to reflect on what you heard in that last session, because you didn't get a chance to join us there. So would that be possible, Ro? Can I drop you in the spot there?
If people are okay about it, because maybe they want to talk about their chat rooms. It was pretty interesting. However, I thought it was the most remarkable session, and I thought it was interesting how really the subject is water and land, and really for us as permaculturists. And we just had someone from England, Menzies, who said her house flooded 10 feet deep in Herefordshire in England. Now, this water problem is going to go away. And what we've got is Boniface with the most fabulous solutions. He is terrific. We've got 24 different strategies that you start well before floods and get onto it. If you talk to Nasna, he's got dry season strategies because he lives in a monsoon area, 6 months rain, 6 months drought. And he's converted huge yellow soil lateritic gullies into a really wonderful monsoonal forest. We've got NATALIE with lovely techniques. What I was looking for is some way of drawing that together so that we understand, as permaculturists in the future, it's going to be our management of water that's going to test us. Too much, too little, too soon, too dirty. And that if we're really starting to think about it, we're going to have to get extremely skilled. I have been asked by the publishers to mention, I put a lot of this into the book. In our group, someone mentioned they're part of a river care program in London. And of course, being able to restore and repair rivers so the water runs clean, we need to be able to do that as permaculturists. We've got to learn that and look after the bore water and restore wetlands. So water isn't just for humans. The landscape is a valid user of water, and I really think we have to grow our knowledge of water to a point where we are right across it in all sorts of ways, and get ready before the problem starts. Get ready for the drought before the drought, get ready for the flood in the dry season, and start thinking well ahead, including our rivers, lakes, estuaries, wetlands, uplands, and the whole lot. That's going to be, not many people are specialising across those fields, and I'd love to see us do it. So back to you. I won't talk long because this is a session for everyone to get into. Okay.
Oh, thank you, Ro. And I really do apologise again that was just too challenging for you to join us in the last session. It would have been so brilliant to have you there. But you were there in like everyone's comments saying, it's because of Ro this, or Ro's perceptions on this has helped to shape how I do things. So, you know, I felt like you were holding that space somehow. So thank you anyway. And I'm sorry, and I'm glad you can jump in here. So thank you so much for listening in. Feel free to leave a comment and continue the chat below. After this session in the live event, we hosted an hour-long permaculture pollination, a global permaculture networking space where people from around the world shared their ideas, questions and reflections. By request, we'll host more events like these and we'll let you know when the next one happens. Thanks so much for being here. Take care. All the best.